Hey everyone, welcome back to Valley of Secrets. I'm Nicci Ruth, and if you're new here, thanks for joining me. Today is part 1 of a series on Robert William Pickton, also known as Willie, the pig farmer that was convicted of killing sex workers in Vancouver, BC. It is a doozy of a story, one that is like a horror movie with a family much like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but this was real life. I remember the shocking horror of this case as it was happening, as I was in my early 20s at the time. Spoiler alert, no one wanted to eat pork for a long time after this case was over. I will warn all of you that what I tell is absolutely disgusting and horrific, so please take care while listening. This is the story of serial killer Robert Willie Pickton. I have to first start with Willie's parents because the dysfunction and disgustingness starts there. Disgustingness. I don't even know if that's a word, but it should be when it talks about this case. The majority of the information today comes from a book called On the Farm by Stevie Cameron, and it goes into far more detail about everything that happened on this farm. So those that want to know more, I do recommend that you go and read that book. So going back to the parents, Leonard was born in England on July 19, 1896, and immigrated to Canada 3 years later. He was one of 4 kids that lived on Dawes Hill in Coquitlam. His siblings were Harold, Clifford, and Lillian. Harold eventually became a night watchman, and Clifford ended up running a nursing home. Lillian married and left the farm, which left Leonard, who inherited it and worked the farm after his parents' death. Leonard was actually known to be quite lazy and unambitious, so him inheriting the farm was actually interesting. I'm not sure how much work he actually did himself or if there was lots of just hired hands, but he really needed a strong, ambitious woman to run the show, and that's exactly what he found in Louise Arnall. Louise was born on March 20th, 1912 in Calgary, Alberta, and she and Leonard met at a coffee shop in Coquitlam. They married pretty soon after, and they lived together on the farm at 2426 Pitt River Road, which is now 2426 Cape Horn Avenue, in a white farmhouse. Sounds pretty cute, right? Well, let me tell you, it wasn't. The farmhouse was falling apart, and it was known to be filthy. Not just untidy, I mean full of manure, garbage, and dirt. Louise didn't believe in cleanliness, and allowed the animals on the farm to roam freely in the house and relieve themselves everywhere without cleaning it up. Ugh, it's just so disgusting. She seemed to thrive living in filth, but what you could say about Louise is that she ran the show. Louise and Leonard were also known for their looks, and I'm not talking good looks. Louise was known to have beady eyes, she had lost all of her teeth rotten out of her face, and she had lost a lot of her hair except for a few wisps, which she actually covered with a bandana. She was known for having a mustache and a goatee, and for wearing her housecoat over men's jeans tucked into gumboots. She was short and stout and had a high-pitched voice and a waddle when she walked. Leonard wasn't much better. He was tall and thin, who wore a t-shirt, jeans, and gumboots as well, and a dirty hat. The neighbors actually called him Piggy, which apparently he didn't seem to mind. But the kids later inherited that name as well when they went to school, which was kind of sad. Leonard and Louise had 3 children, Linda in 1948, Robert on October 24th, 1949, and David a year later in 1950. Robert went by Robbie as a small child, but then it quickly changed to Willie. When Willie was born, the cord was wrapped around his neck, and they actually thought that he might have had brain damage. It's kind of interesting that they thought that, because when you find out all that he does, I don't think brain damage even comes close to what is wrong with him. Man, I would really love to study that man's brain. Apparently, Willie looked a lot like his dad. He was tall and thin with a pointy nose and was actually called Rat Face from the kids in school. Again, that's terrible. Linda and Dave looked more like Louise. They were shorter, rounder faced. I'm not exactly sure who got the better end of the stick in that one. The boys grew up working hard on the farm, while Linda was able to go out and socialize more. The boys got a lot of hand-me-down or handmade clothes that they wore every day, while Linda got pretty party dresses. Louise thought it was important for Linda to be like other kids, so she got better treatment than Willie and Dave. It's kind of sad, really. But despite this, Willie was known to be a mama's boy and didn't really get along with his father at all. When you looked at the family, you would actually think that they were very poor in the way that they lived. But in actuality, they were rich for their time, like really well off. They lived among all the doctors, lawyers, and professionals in the area. They sold all the meat that was on the farm, and they also were infamous because the family sold chunks of their land to real estate developers, so they made a pretty penny. But no one would have ever known that they had money. They were always dirty and smelled so bad. Apparently, the house had no shower, and the kids only bathed once a week if they were lucky. And even when they did, the smell wouldn't be completely gone. I mean, they lived in a pig farm with pig and whatever other kind of shit in their house, so I can't imagine. Apparently, Willie was afraid of water, especially on his face, so that smell followed him for the rest of his life because he never bathed people. Never bathed. Ugh, I just can't. I have the most sensitive nose to smell, so I would have just lost it and ralphed all over the place around that family. Willie started at Millside Elementary School, then moved to Alexander Viscount, where he struggled academically. He even had to repeat grade 2 and was put into special education class for the remainder of his schooling years. In grade 5, he transferred to Mary Hill Elementary in Port Coquitlam, where he was shunned by his rich neighbor kids. Willie was shy and a bit of a loner, and it was said that he actually hid in the carcasses of dead pigs when he wanted to hide from people. A red flag there. Around 12 years old, Willie went to an animal auction with his parents and had saved up enough money to buy himself a 3-week-old calf. Willie loved that calf and raced home every day after school to feed it. It was meant to be his own pet. But one day after school, he couldn't find it. And after looking all over the property with no success, his father told him to go check the barn. And there, hanging upside down on a hook, butchered, was Willie's calf. Willie was so mad that he didn't talk to anyone for 3 to 4 days. Honestly, poor kid. I mean, that's horrible. He had a tough upbringing that makes you feel sorry for him. Well, that is at least until we get into his adult years. But his childhood was horrible. Where the heck was Child Protective Services in the 1950s? I would like to know that. Around this time, Linda had had enough of living the disgusting, smelly farm life and said, "Peace out." She went to live with relatives in Vancouver when she was in grade 8. Willie ended up dropping out of school at age 14, while Dave stayed a little bit longer. Shockingly, Dave was really popular among the ladies. He dated a lot in high school, while Willie stayed the loner working the farm. They were opposites in many ways, but not always, which I will talk about probably more in part 2. In 1967, the family moved to another farm on 963 Dominion Avenue in Port Coquitlam. But they didn't just move themselves. They moved the old smelly piece of crap farmhouse with them. Like, what? I don't know. I can't understand why they would do that. I'm also surprised that it didn't fall apart during the move. This family, I tell you, it's like no other I have ever heard of, at least in real life. It really does feel like this is fiction, but unfortunately, it's not. Back then, there wasn't many places for people to store their meat. So the Picktons actually bought 100 large commercial freezers to store their meat along with other people's meat, and they called it B&C Frosted Foods. But most people called it the meat locker. I have to say that Louise was very financially smart and business-minded, but she just didn't spend it on anything that mattered, especially her children. But don't get too comfortable with things sounding okay with this household, because things were about to change for the worse, if you can believe it. On October 17th, 1967, around 7:30 p.m., Dave was driving his dad's GMC one-ton truck home and hit 14-year-old Tim Barrett, who was walking home from a friend's. But instead of stopping, Dave drove straight home. There was blood on the hood of the car and a big dent in the right fender where Tim was struck. And the paint was flaked off in that area as well. Leonard told him to go to the mechanic immediately to get it fixed, so Dave did. Dave told the mechanic that a log fell on the truck, and the mechanic was actually surprised that they even wanted to fix the truck at all, because apparently it was falling apart, there was like a bad paint job everywhere. But he said he would hammer out the dent, but that he would not paint the truck. While Dave was at the mechanic, Louise went to the site of the accident and saw Tim laying next to the road. And like Pickton fashion, she rolled him into the slough in the ditch and left the scene. What a absolutely horrible human being, if you can even call her a human being. Philip Barrett called the friend's house at 11 p.m. looking for his son. And when he found out that Tim had left hours earlier, he went searching up Dominion Avenue and came across Tim's shoe on the road. And there in the ditch was his son, dead. Ugh, I can't even imagine the pain this poor family went through. Like, what a sad, horrible way to find your kid. The mechanic felt that something was off when he was talking with Dave and trying to fix the truck. And when he saw the hit and run on the news, he had a suspicion that Dave was somehow involved. So he called the RCMP and a search warrant was issued for Dave's truck. Officers took paint chips from the truck and matched them to paint on Tim's body. Now, the heartbreaking part is this. Tim didn't actually die from the hit. He did have a broken and dislocated pelvis, a fractured skull, deep bruises, and a subcranial hemorrhage. But what he died from was drowning in the dirty, brown slough water. His watch actually stopped at 7:45 p.m. How gut-wrenching is that? Dave was charged and convicted on December 19, 1967, but honestly, he got a slap on the wrist. He was placed on indefinite probation and his license was suspended till he was 21, which was another 4 years. Shockingly, Louise was never charged with anything, but there was a lot of talk about it over the years. As the years went on, Dave ended up working construction while Willie stayed on the farm with the pigs. And in 1972, Dave had a new girlfriend, Sandy Humany. She was beautiful with long blonde hair and blue eyes. No one could understand why she was with Dave. Dave was a vulgar, foul-mouthed asshole, but he seemed to never have a problem picking up women. On April 14, 1973, Sandy moved in with Dave on the farm. Now at this point, there was Leonard and Louise, Dave, Willie, herself, and 2 farmhands living in that one farmhouse. I still can't comprehend how anyone could live in that filth. Sandy worked hard on the farm, and eventually she ended up getting pregnant and had Dave's daughter Tammy on January 11, 1974, and then just a year and a half later, Douglas John was born, and they called him DJ. Somehow, I just can't picture Dave as a father, but as he is building his family, Willie is shy and awkward around women. He much preferred to write women letters as pen pals. Now, I'm probably aging myself here, but I remember the day that we would write letters to our friends. I mean, there wasn't really emails or anything at that point. So much has changed since I was even in my younger years. One of the women, Connie Anderson, lived in Michigan, and so he decided that he would go and visit her for 6 weeks in 1974. He came home saying that he was engaged to her, but Connie couldn't leave her home, and Willie couldn't leave the farm, so the relationship did eventually end. But funny story is that Willie told everyone that when he was in the USA, he was asked to become a male model. Now, that's kind of laughable. Like, a male model for what exactly? I just don't know, but apparently it must have made his day. Between 1974 to 1977, the farm had grown to have 700 pigs and 150 cattle. It was a huge operation. Willie had been training as a meat cutter apprentice for 6.5 years, but he quit 6 months before he was to receive his certification. Like, why? I don't get that. He then went to work as a truck driver for BC Hydro to make more money. 1978 came, and it was a hard year that changed everything in that family. Leonard actually had been really sick, and he died of cancer. Dave and Sandy's relationship also had taken a turn for the worst, and she moved out with the kids. There was also a huge barn fire that killed 600 pigs on the farm. Now, Willie had grown close to Sandy over the years, and it was said that when she was leaving Dave, he actually proposed to her himself. What? Like, that's your sister-in-law. It's so weird that he would do that, but this goes to show you that not all was up there with Willie. Guys, the more I talk about this family, the more I shake my head in disbelief with some of the things I'm talking about. Sandy, of course, declined, and she got out of Dodge. It didn't take long for Dave to find another girlfriend, Vicki Evans, and she moved in soon after. Sandy ended up moving to Mission, and she actually remarried. The kids ended up seeing Dave maybe once or twice a month after that. By 1979, Louise was sick with cancer, and she died on April 1st, 1979. Louise left everything to the kids, but Willie got a different deal than Linda and Dave. Willie got a lump sum of $20,000, but he was unable to receive the rest unless he stayed on the farm until he was 40 years old. Linda and Dave got their funds immediately. There was no obligation to stay on the farm for them. Willie, of course, thought this was unfair, and he felt extremely betrayed by his own mom. I'm not sure why Louise did what she did. It was really a manipulative blow to Willie. But now, with both parents gone, Willie was left to his own devices, and that will become a huge problem. So by the early 1980s, things on the Pickton farm start to shift. And this is where we really start to feel that slow, uncomfortable slide towards something darker. Willie had developed this reputation around town as someone who loved cars and trucks by this time. He could fix just about anything: engines, parts, junk vehicles. If it was broken, Willie wanted to take it apart and figure it out. He became what people called a junk buyer. He was always buying scrap, old vehicles, and machinery. Anything he could tinker with, which was spread all over that farm property. It honestly looked like a junkyard. Willie was still regularly going to those livestock auctions that he went with his parents. He would buy animals at the auction, usually ones that were the worst looking, piglets with sores, or cows that were blind, as they were cheaper. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there. Around this time, Willie also began working with a Filipino butcher named Patricio, or Pat Casanova. Casanova, I like that last name. Anyways, Pat was well known in the Filipino community and Chinatown, supplying barbecued pork to restaurants and community events. Pat would come out to the farm frequently to help Willie butcher the pigs. Then he would barbecue them and sell them to the restaurant community. He and Willie became really close friends over the course of the 20 years that they knew each other. And according to CBC News, Casanova said that they would process about 20 to 25 pigs every single week, but usually Willie was the one that butchered them. Now, this is kind of gross, but Willie would slit their throats, that is, if they were small enough to do so. If the animals were too large, he would actually shoot them in the head with a nail gun. then make a deep slit in their ankles, hoist their body up feet first, and let them bleed out. Sometimes the animals were still alive when he started, so he'd slit the throat and let the blood drain, then gut it, skin it with a fillet knife, and dismember them with handsaws. It sounds so awful, but this is pretty much what happens on these kind of farms. I don't think that this was out of the norm. It just sounds so inhumane to me that I may need to consider becoming a vegetarian after this case. Now, like I mentioned before, Willie was a trained meat cutter, and yet by all accounts, he was not good at it. Despite all that experience, he really did struggle. So instead of improving his skills, he outsourced the final cuts. He brought in small local butchers to turn the large hunks of meat into proper steaks. Now, with that many animals butchered comes a lot of waste. Bones, remains, parts that couldn't be sold. And Willie's solution was simple. He used Dave's backhoes to dig 30 to 40 feet deep holes in the property. Once the pit was dug, he would dump the animal bones and parts in until it was full, and then he would bury it. Honestly, I can't even imagine the smell of the dead meat carcasses, all of that on the farm, until he actually buried it. Ugh. I can't imagine how much this place smelled, honestly, and it is so disgusting to me. At the exact same time that Willie was doing all of this, Dave had gone in a completely different direction. He wanted nothing to do with farming anymore, although he did still live on the property in a trailer. He was more focused on building demolition and topsoil. And more than that, he wanted to be a biker. He idolized the Hells Angels, which are a biker gang here. And eventually, police started hearing rumors that both Dave and Willie were involved in running a chop shop right there on the farm. Stolen vehicles were being brought in, stripped for parts, and either sold or buried. Sound familiar? The Pickton farm became a place to gather, do illegal activities, bury things, and have loud parties with the Hells Angels. In 1981, Willie hired 3 or 4 teenage boys to help muck out the pig pens. A couple of them actually did live on the property, but he didn't pay them like he had told them that he would. Instead, bikers would send these boys out to steal the cars, and when they brought them back to the farm, that's when they got paid. And they were paid very well, apparently. Eventually, police started asking questions. 2 officers were sent to investigate, and surprisingly, Willie cooperated. He showed police exactly where the vehicles were buried on the property. And the boys told investigators that Willie was the boss of that chop shop, and that Dave often wasn't there. So it's kind of an interesting change of events when it seemed like Dave was the ringleader in all of this. But maybe not. Inside the farmhouse, things were starting to unravel. Dave and Willie were fighting constantly. The house was still filthy. Willie wouldn't wash his sheets or towels for months, you guys. Months. Ugh. Gross. Sometimes the floor would flood downstairs, and he would just leave it that way. He wouldn't do anything about it, so I can't even imagine the smell of mildew and all that mold. That would be disgusting. Anyways, Dave's girlfriend, Vicki Evans, had finally had enough and ended up moving out. Good for you, Vicki. She was quickly replaced by a lady named Kathy, who moved in with her 2 daughters, Tasha and April. Linda, meanwhile, remember the older sister, had built a separate life. She had married, had 2 sons in the early 1980s, and kept her distance from her brothers, unless it had to do only with business. Good for her. Proud of you, Linda. In 1986, a woman named Karen Kaufman went to a bar with her sister and met Dave and Kathy. After that, Karen started visiting the Pickton farm regularly. And this actually surprised me because she actually said she enjoyed her time there. But her impressions of Willie were very clear. She described him as weird, a loner, unsociable, with a mentality of an 8-year-old. Karen eventually did meet a man named Jim and got married, and they had 3 kids of their own. But she never forgot Willie. She remembered a specific incident that stuck with her. One night, Dave took Karen and Kathy down to the basement of the farmhouse to see Willie's room. Most likely, it was Dave just trying to make fun of his weird brother. But what Karen noticed was that there was no real furniture in the room other than a filthy mattress on the floor with a dark splotch in the middle of it. So gross. I can't even imagine what that dark splotch was, but anyways. Sorry guys, there's a lot of and vomiting in this whole episode because I like I said, my sense of smell, I just can't imagine this disgusting filth that these people can live in. It blows my mind. On the wall was a horse's head, 3 coats of arms, which I guess has to do with the whole Pickton ancestry, and a book about local history and the Pickton family. Those happened to be his prized possessions, and he was extremely territorial. Willie came downstairs and saw them in the room. So Willie was mad and spat in Kathy's face and threatened to kill her if she ever came in his room again. Another time, I'm not sure if it was the same day or a different day, but he threw a glass of milk in Karen's face. I'm unsure what that was all about, but Willie's temper was clearly escalating. Karen had said he was super creepy and very unsettling to be around. She also reported that Willie would never use his own pigs for the pig roast that they had on the farm. He claimed they were too sick and he didn't want to eat them. Now, that is super suspicious and makes me wonder what the heck was going on at that time that he wouldn't even eat his own pigs. Disturbing, to say the least. And once you find out what happens on this farm in part 2 and part 3, possibly, depends how long we go, and there's lots to go through, you will probably never want to eat pork again. Just saying. Dave, meanwhile, had his own violent streak. While working construction at one of his sites, he lured a female flagger into his trailer and sexually assaulted her. She reported it to the police, but afterwards the bikers, I take it the Hells Angels, threatened and intimidated her at her own home. But nonetheless, Dave was charged, but the punishment was extremely minimal. A $1,000 fine and probation. Now, as you can see, this seems to be a cycle with Dave, and no one seems to take anything seriously. He keeps just getting a slap on the wrist and sent on his way. It's extremely disappointing. Eventually, Willie stopped burying the animal remains on the property. Maybe he ran out of sites, I'm not sure. But he began dumping them at a rendering plant called West Coast Reduction in downtown Vancouver. Between 1992 and 1996, a driver named Jim Kress picked up the bins from the farm when Willie didn't actually drive to Vancouver. He also had somebody come and pick them up for him. And one day he looked in the containers and said that the contents looked strange. The meat was actually black and there was large chunks, which was strange, as usually farmers wanted to use all the meat that they could so that they could sell it and make money. But nobody asked him any questions. They just let Willie continue to do this. At the rendering plant, the material that was brought in is ground up, cooked in deep fat fryers until the grease separates. Then it is sent off to be used in everyday products, cosmetics, candles, soaps, paints, plastics, and textiles. Everyday items. Kind of disgusting when you think about that, especially when you find out later what was in those containers. Anyway. When Willie finished the drop-off, his reward to himself was driving through East Hastings Street watching the sex workers. And this is where the next chapter begins. Because by now, the warning signs are not subtle anymore. They're everywhere. We're going to finish part 1 here because it's already been a lot to digest. And speaking of digest, I don't think I'll be eating for a while now. Join me next time for part 2, where I start to delve into Willie's next steps and into the beginning of the murders. Thanks for listening. You can find all the photos of this case on my Instagram and Facebook at Valley of Secrets Podcast. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and stay curious.